And the Tannhauser is back, broadcasting from the emergency system across the water at Night City's harbor control. But first, a message from our sponsor, Arasaka.
If you have a door, you need a scanway. Arasaka knows that dealing with the public can be difficult. One never knows what a customer or visitor may be hiding beneath their clothes or their cyber limbs. Protect your premises with an Arasaka scanway. 3 models are available: weapon detector, cyberware detector, and chemicals and explosive detector. Scanway frames are available in an assortment of colors and styles, allowing them to blend in with your decor. Arasaka. Feel protected. Alright, welcome to episode 2 of the Tannhauser Connection. I am Carl the Black Goat.
And I'm Jamie. Now, even though Red has only been released as a Jump Start Kit, the rules have been simplified. The timeline has been advanced to 2045. This causes a lot of repercussions for the characters, so today we're going to explore those.
But first, a bit of a disclaimer. This episode is for people who just got the Jumpstart Kit and want to extend their playing experience using some of the 2020 rules, or vice versa. So if you haven't read either of the rulebooks, you're gonna be a little bit lost.
We've explored the changes to the character's life path and their stats as well.
We also go through the 10 roles. Even if they didn't change drastically, we discuss what each role has become now in the time of the Red.
We also examine the shortened skill list that appears in the Jumpstart Kit and the changes it reveals to the bigger system, and also a few of our favourite little additions to the new version of the game. So hang on tight and get ready for some information overload.
Oh, look, we found this cool little DVD. Hey Jim, do you know how to scan this thing and get it going? Alright, let's stream it and see what's going on there.
I suppose the first section we need to look at in Cyberpunk's Jump Start Kit is character development, because character is the core of what we're looking at, really.
Yeah, so in Cyberpunk Jump Start Kit, they still kept the Lifepath, which was kind of like the background and what made your character who it is. And they simplify a lot of the tables into like a straight background, motivation, goals, personality, romance, friends and enemies. That's it. So it's very familiar. I think the Cyberpunk 2020 had more details. For example, if you had an enemy, you could roll a little bit further to see why did you make that enemy, who pissed off whom, what were you gonna do about it, and what resources that person had to kind of chase after you.
Cyberpunk, the 2020 core rulebook actually has a lot more detail, which is kind of makes it really nice in that sort of regard.
Yeah, I like that they kept the same categories. The basic is there, it gives you the initial idea, and if you want to go a little bit deeper on it, you can do that with your GM.
Going that extra step deeper is always a great thing, because as a player, it gives you more things to work with. And if you've got a better character background, a bit more detail, then your actions, what you do, become far more interesting and more motivated in that sort of sense.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about the pre-gens is that they didn't pre-generate your background for you, but you still get to roll it, and that's kind of a nice way of making a template pre-gen character a little bit personalized.
Well, that's kind of similar to what I did when I started running 2020 earlier this year, is that I created pre-gen characters that had a collection of skills, but the personality, the flavour of that character was really up to the players to invest what they wanted in that. And I thought that gives better player buy-in and that sort of stuff to make more fun.
Another thing that I noticed it was considerably different is that all the romances are a tragic love affair, which I love, because when I roll characters for 2020, a lot of the romances are like, all right, you have a lot of hot and fast dates that year, and that was it. And it's like, all right, well, what does that mean? Like, all right, I slept around. But the tragic one is like, it's a big thing. Like, you know, your lover was kidnapped or your lover was killed in a fight. It's like something that really affects a person. So
yes, it does.
I love that they kept that.
Well, I think it's an important part to keep, and I've got players in the current group. One of them has a tragic love affair, and we've worked out that he was responsible for this other person going mad, and so that's going to play out some point in the future that I can then take and then use.
That's a heavy burden to carry, yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't think this player is particularly worried about it yet, but it'll come back to bite them.
So I think for the Lifepath part of Cyberpunk Jump Start Kit, you can use what they have on the page, and if you wanted to roll more detail, you can go back to 2020 and do that Lifepath. I think they're completely compatible. Another thing that I've done sometimes, I don't know if it's a common knowledge, but when you're creating the villains or even some NPCs that you know the characters are gonna spend some time with, I roll a Lifepath for them.
Oh, look, that's the huge benefit of it, is that as a GM, if you need to build up a collection of NPCs with a bit of detail to them, this gives you that building block, and it's not a separate thing for villains and heroes. And this is the thing that really struck me about Cyberpunk when I first started playing it, because I looked at it and go, where are the villains? And then all of a sudden it comes into this idea of, the players can be the villains.
Nice.
The villains are just like the players.
Usually when I create an NPC, I also try to find a character from a TV series or from a movie that I like, and then I give it like a similar description. So if a player comes in and asks me like, how does he look, or what does he do, or where does he come from, or something, I'll just kind of think back at this character in the TV series and answer. And it also helps kind of with the mannerisms, with the voices, if I'm doing the voices.
Look, that point it's a great cheat as both a player and as a GM, because there are so many characters that I've played and characters I've run that are just sort of my version of whatever from whatever movie, like whatever character. So there's all of that like scope that you can just delve into, not just cyberpunk fiction, but any sort of movie that you want to do. I've had people who've taken one of the hero characters from the Fast and Furious movie as their thing.
Nice.
You know, it's just you pick and choose from wherever, and you make it more cyberpunk by adding those details to it to make that character fit the world that it's in.
I had a fixer that was absolutely based on Don Corleone from The Godfather.
Oh, brilliant. Just from a couple of random rolls on a table, you've built up a bit of an identity profile for a character or an NPC. And the good thing about the Jumpstart Kit is that you get to be able to list all these sort of things, and you can note them down in your character sheet. There's like a small little box you can fill in the blanks for.
Yeah, but it gets the story rolling on your head of like what happened. Even though you're only rolling for a certain particular things, the combination of it makes you, kind of forces you to tell a story in your head, and out of the sudden now you know who this person is.
Or even just to explain those connections, which is great.
There were some stats that changed. Attractiveness got dropped.
Well, looking at the wording for cool, attractiveness kind of becomes cool, because cool is your ability to deal with things socially, is to look good while doing it, which is kind of your attractiveness kind of thing. Not completely, but
the way they
mostly.
describe it is like cool now is what cool was supposed to be. Cool basically is like when you look cool, that's your cool. And to keep your cool, that becomes your willpower.
Yes. And cool will used to be the one thing in the old version. Now they've sort of split it out and gone, okay, you've got your cool and you've got your will, so you can keep yourself focused and on task, which is kind of a nice evolution. And the other change that they've made is they've split reflexes, which was a catch-all coordination skill, a stat, sorry.
It was too overpowered. You used reflex for absolutely everything.
Yeah, definitely. They've split it into reflexes and dexterity. So you have your dexterity for your athletics, your martial arts, your brawling and that sort of stuff. And you have your reflexes for your weapon skills and your driving. And you've also got body, which is how physically intimidating or big you are. Not intimidating, but how big you are.
So that has actually changed in the sense that now there is hit points.
Yes.
So your body affects your hit points. As in 2020, everyone had the same you could take the same amount of damage.
With the old version, everybody had the same hit points, but depending on your body, you could reduce the damage a little bit. So if you took a lot of small wounds, you'd still get stuffed up. But if you took a big wound, you would suffer less than somebody who had a lower body. Whereas the new system, you've got this different amount of hit points, and your stun save to avoid falling unconscious or being inactive or even dying in worst case scenarios, it works the same way.
All right, so back to attractiveness. Sorry to go back to it.
Yeah.
So what happened with attractiveness? I read one of the reasons that they changed it is because in 2020 you could basically go and get an operation and basically become a clone of a celebrity with like 10 attractiveness.
Yeah. Look,
so basically it meant that you could purchase the stat.
Attractiveness was a dump stat. Everybody would start with 2, and then they'd fork over 600 euros per point to bump it up to whatever they needed. And so most of the time, it just made it irrelevant. The other stats that I don't think we've touched on is empathy, which is your ability to relate to other people. And it's also really important because as you add more cyberware, it strips away your empathy. And so that's the trade-off that you make.
Keep humanity? Is humanity still a thing on the
I haven't seen it in the Jump Start Kit. The entire rules about cyber psychosis, which is your loss of humanity, they've basically said, we're not going to worry about it for the Jump Start Kit.
Fair enough.
And that's a fair call because you don't want to add too much extra to it and keep it nice and simple. And given they've only listed like maybe half a dozen pieces of cyberware, an eye, an ear, arms and legs, and a couple of weapons, it's like, well, you know what? It's not worth worrying about.
I don't see why you couldn't just use the 2020 rules of empathy and humanity loose. If you wanted to run red or with the jump start with like different cyberware, just use the 2020 rules. It's fine. One of the things that I notice people talking about from the jump start, if you're playing with jump start, there is not really any reason why everyone shouldn't use assault rifles, because all the difficulty values for them to hit are lower than everything else, and also they do higher damage. So they are aware of that. Obviously, they said take into consideration that you cannot walk around with an assault rifle, and also they are harder to find. But again, I think they were gonna expand more on the rules later on to kind of balance it out a little bit.
Yeah, the current set of rules really only give, this general classification of weapon does this general classification of damage. So an assault rifle might do 5d6, which is fairly dangerous. But the thing is that, the cop can get away with walking around with particular things, but even a cop's going to have a problem walking around with an assault rifle on the street unless they're loaded up in tactical gear and about to do an assault. So those kind of things play out quite interestingly. And the concealability rules aren't in there. So assault rifles are not concealable.
That is right.
You cannot hide them. I've got players who walk around with their assault rifle broken down in a large suitcase. But if you get
and then it takes what, a couple of turns to get it out and assemble it.
Well, it comes down to a weaponsmith roll to reassemble the weapon, and if that's happening in a live
under fire, you're fucked.
Yeah, basically yes, and that's the problem you pay.
The last thing I wanted to mention is the specific location hit. It's gone in the jumpstart rules. In 2020, you used to roll every time you hit to see if it hit the head, the chest, torso, right arm, left arm. And on the Jumpstart Kit, now you always hit torso unless you specifically go for the head, then you have a penalty.
Yep.
But again, that was just to simplify because it's a starter kit. When I played it, I just went back to the location table.
Yeah, and
it's all good. I think it's just like an extra step that you should talk with your players or with your GM saying, are we gonna do specific locations? If yes, then it's just one extra dice that you have to roll. That's all. I like how they put that option of, or the suggestions of what the normal parties could be like. I thought that was a great addition, which basically tells you, you could be a trauma team party, and they need a netrunner because of this, they need some solos because of that, they need some medics because of that. You could be a small company trying to get established on a city. You could be a group of detectives.
Yes.
Like, it just gives you some scenario tips, and it gives you what roles can possibly fit in it. I thought that was a great addition.
The hard thing about running groups in Cyberpunk is players naturally distrust one another because it's all everybody out for himself, or that's what it feels like. But this stuff in the Jump Start Kit really gives you these solid reasons to team up, to work together to achieve your goals as a group and form that tight little group to really get things done.
Let's move on to roles. What roles change? What changed from 2020 to the Jumpstart Kit?
Yep.
There's still, 9 roles?
Well, yeah, it says 9 roles, but there's kind of 10 because the techie gets doubled up in a weird way, but we'll get to that. So, first up is the solo, which is short for a Soldier of Fortune. Basically, these guys fill the classic D&D role of the fighter in the party. My gaming group started referring to them as Kleenexes because one of them would get blown away and you just replace it with the next one, much like a box of Kleenexes. So it wasn't a particularly positive term for them because this is just what tended to happen.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So do you think anything has changed from the solos from 2020 to the Jumpstart Kit?
I don't think that much has changed, but then it's a bit hard to tell because in the Jumpstart Kit there's no details about the solo special ability because their special ability was basically it would be a bonus to their initiative, so they would move first and therefore kill first. And
what is it now?
Well, it doesn't say yet. We haven't got the red book, so we'll find out when it gets here.
All right.
Do you want to jump to Nomads now?
Yeah, let's go Nomad. I think the description of the role and the name is still the same, but I think Nomads changed a lot in the world of Red in terms that they now have a lot more power because they control the transportation in between cities.
Oh, yeah.
Which is now a massive thing. So I think it gives the Nomad players a lot more... I felt before it was kind of not hard, but you have to have a really good reason to get the Nomad to get into the city and interact. But now
they're the kind of the lifeblood that connects all the cities together, and they're the ones who are doing that traveling round. Law enforcement or lawmen in the new version of Cyberpunk works kind of similar to the Paladins in AD&D. They either side of that alignment divide.
To the what?
Paladins, the holy warriors of D&D. And
sorry, I've been calling them paladins my whole life.
Everybody calls it something different. Look, I'm not certain about the words. They might be paladins, they might be paladins.
No, just because I learned it in Spanish, and some words just stay in my mind.
Yes,
in Spanish.
Look,
but right.
My English is not great sometimes, but anyhow. But the thing is that they also fit in both sides of that divide, in that you get lawful good ones, which are the noble cops or lawmen who are working for the good of the community, and you also get those evil ones who are completely out for themselves, the crooked cop idea, and that fits really nicely. So,
why the name change? Because the class the role seems to be similar. It was cop, now it's lawman.
Well, I think with the changes in Cyberpunk, we've gone from the only people who can enact and enforce the law are police officers, and they had a whole source book called Protect and Serve about that, to you've also got corporate security. So
okay,
I can see little regions of the world where the corporate law is the only law that is valid, and you've got the security forces of that who are stepping in and doing their thing.
I like the idea of the forensic guy, the narcotics, I guess. It gives it a lot more flavor, I think.
Look, it gives a lot of scope. If you want to go full combat crazy, of course there's SWAT, or you can go into undercover operations. So you can run some other campaign and just drop one cop player in there who's desperately trying to hide their identity. Otherwise, it's all going to go sideways for them.
Here's a tricky question. I don't know the answer, but let's say I am a player who wants to be really good at killing people. So I'm like, all right, my first choice is a solo.
Yep.
But couldn't I be a lawman instead to take advantage of like the actual system and still have pretty much the same skills?
Well, the skills will be very similar. In the only advantage a solo has over any other class, according to Cyberpunk 2020, is that their combat sense adds to initiative. But there is cyberware to boost things, and my gut instincts is that the combat sense advantage is going to shift and change a little bit. I don't know yet, but I'll wait and see what happens. But you can pick up a nomad or a cop. Hell, you could even take a techie who normally has no weapon skills, and with your pickup skills, the bonus skills you get for being whatever, pick up how to use a handgun super effectively, how to do martial arts, enough of the what I think of as the combat skills to get that happening for your character. It's a lot easier with something like a lawman or a nomad, but it's still a possibility.
I guess what I'm asking is, what will be the difference between being a security guard, which will be a lawman, like a private corp security, or a solo bodyguard?
Well, lawmen or cops get their advantage in what they call authority, or at least that's what it was called in the old system. We'll wait and see for the new stuff.
Okay.
And that allows them to intimidate people just by the fact they're a lawman. They have the thing. The other thing they have as a fairly decent advantage that doesn't really get enacted that often is they get access to a lot more equipment and stuff legally that other people don't. So if your character is walking around in heavy armor with a pistol slapped to their side, if you do that in the corporate sector, you're going to get pulled over, you're going to get interrogated, you're going to get harassed. But if you do the same thing with a cop's badge on your chest, all of a sudden, that's fine.
That is a really good point.
So being a cop allows you to walk into some situations and be perfectly fine. But you flip that on its head and walk through the gang streets of deep in the combat zone, and that's just asking for trouble. So, and that's something where something like a nomad might be better off.
It's worth mentioning that on the Cyberpunk Jump Start, there is no description, or there is no full description for the medias, the lawmen, and the executives.
No, it's
because
just,
there is no pre-gen characters for them.
It's just like a single paragraph of text, really.
Alright, next is the influencers and facemen. One of the signature roles of Cyberpunk is the rocker boy. I don't think it changed much from Cyberpunk 2020 to Red, but because the scale of influence and the reach is a lot smaller, I think it's going to be played a little bit different. Particularly because of the introduction of the data pool. So having no net, like no internet as we know it now, instead there is these message boards that are locally available within cities, and people can upload and push content there directly, which means there's a lot more room for like influencers, like the equivalent of nowadays, like YouTubers or Instagram people, use original content coming from an independent source.
And that's kind of really nice because you don't have like a single gatekeeper controlling everything so that they decide which rockers will go up and be world famous and which won't. Everybody's able to carve their own path, sometimes viciously through the streets.
Yeah, and I think it's easier for them to do it now that they have access to a data pool, so they can create and push their own content. And if something is good, kind of like that concept of word of the street, and if you're going for gigs and stuff, will raise you up into like a local celebrity way faster than if you were competing with like worldwide celebrities owned by like massive TV stations. So that gives rockers, I think, more power. What I'm thinking now, in 2020, rockers were always, or not always, but a lot of them were fighting to bring down the corporations. And now the corporations went down. So rockers kind of achieved a lot of what they wanted. So now that a lot of the corporations are down, the Rocker has more power to prevent all these new corporations that are coming up on Red from rising.
Yeah, it's possible, but the thing is that, I mean, a lot of the campaigns I've played, or a lot of the stuff I've thought about, is that you also get rockers who get subverted, and those that end up working for the smaller corporations. Then these smaller corps, the neo-corps as they're referred to, start off in a really positive light, and then may slowly evolve over time to become something a lot darker. And, you know, if you look at it, some of the rockers may felt like they've won, but then they may become complacent. So there's definite opportunities to really carve good stories into that space.
Yeah. And with the media role, let's go into media.
Oh, yeah.
Again, the role itself hasn't changed, but because the world has changed, I think they have now a different type of power.
Well,
the whole thing of going local.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, I think that's an important thing, being able to play that local part. But I think because they're pre-recording a bunch of stuff, and there's 2 posts, one by Truncheon and Flagons that I read, and another one on Facebook about how to do medias. And it was kind of interesting to go through it, because yes, they're one part bard, but they can also be one part sinister vizier in the background, whispering in the ears to create this credibility is their special ability, but their ability to present that very public face. So they can end up being, spin doctors and public relation nightmares. Or conversely, they can be the investigative reporter who's trying to bring things down. And so as a result of this change in the world where the big corporations have disappeared and you've got a lot of independent news people doing their thing, those guys have greater influence as a result.
There is now probably medias that are sent to other cities to collect news and bring them back to like the locals. So like what are you saying, investigative reporting or tourism.
This sort of brings slightly sideways to another part of the Cyberpunk system, which is reputation. So for a media, their reputation is far, far more important, because if they have a good rep, they're able to open doors, to influence people, to really get what they want out of an exchange with others. But if their rep goes bad, if they get discredited, then their life becomes far more difficult. And it makes for a challenging role. The only media I've managed to play is one called Clip, who was basically just there to go around and record stuff, kind of like doing stock footage and background information for a corporation. But with the group of players I was running with, I fully expected him to be the other role of the media with his name Clip, is to get full of bullets. Because as soon as things get covert and they don't want the story getting out, the first thing that the players want to do is they want to remove the media from the situation, sometimes forcibly.
Delete the evidence. Yeah, I had a media character who she had a handycam, but that was a decoy because she was always recording with this robotic ferret that followed her around from the distance.
Yep.
What do we have left?
Okay, so next up we've got to look at those kind of support roles. In this case, we're looking at netrunners, techies, and medtechs. And the techie-medtech combination is, they're both listed as techies, but one deals with the metal, the other deals with the meat. And going with what we're already on with, the techies have more influence in the world because everything's broken. It needs fixing.
Yeah, all the lines of supply have been disrupted, which means what you have is what you get.
Yep.
You cannot, you can, but it's gonna take a while. It's gonna cost more money to get something that is not available right now in your town.
Yeah, look, so, money or time.
Yeah, and again, I think with the lack of supply chain, if you have cyberware and it's getting damaged, it's not like you can get a warranty or you could go back to the factory and order the missing part. You're gonna have to find a Reaper dog to fucking
to patch you,
play with it and
Well, the great thing about the Ripper dock is that they can patch you up. The great thing about the Techie is they can jerry-rig to get it working. And it may only work for a couple of minutes, but sometimes that's all you need.
All right, and let's talk about the Netrunner, which I think is the biggest
It's a
change,
massive change
of the whole Cyberpunk Red and the Jump Start Kit.
Yeah, look, to my mind, the Netrunner has always filled the role of the wizard at a D&D. They're the weakest in terms of physical stuff, but they can get the most powerful stuff done in terms of influencing the net, opening doors with a twitch of a neuron, and that sort of stuff. And it was, for me, they never lived up to the potential in the old version of Cyberpunk because it was.
I actually never played them just because it was so complicated.
Well, that's the reason.
That everyone was like, you know what? No Netrunners. Netrunners are just gonna be NPCs, and we're gonna roll to see if they can do what they are supposed to do.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna go into the net and
people had two solutions for
do
this.
Combat and whatnot.
The first is the one you've just described, which is it's an NPC. The second is to make a pure net running team, and that's what you do. Thankfully, with the new system, it's actually made it playable and doable without breaking into a different game just to do this. So the great thing is that the Netrunners are now more involved in the meat space kind of reality of things.
I love that definition, like that differentiation of meat space and cyberspace.
Yes,
it's awesome. So if you were to describe it really quickly, of the biggest changes for me, from what I can tell, is that each level is a lot more simple, as in there is one obstacle and a possibility of a file, and that's it.
Well, yeah.
And then you go to the next level.
Best way to think of it is like layers of an onion, just to get a Shrek meme in there. But as you peel back these layers and crack the shell of this data pool you're trying to break into, you're able to reveal more and more information as you get deeper and deeper into that sort of thing. And it kind of is how computer security works in real life anyway, which is...
when you access, you're in the public kind of
there's a public
folder,
space,
and then as you start coming towards root, you get access to better things.
Exactly. You start with the public space, you move into registered users, then you move into secure users and admins, and you work your way up the hierarchy to get yourself into root access where you get control of the entire system. And that's where you can drop in like backdoors and quick accesses for the next time you need it. So for that sort of stuff, I kind of think...
But you can still get your brains fried.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, it's nothing's for free. And you look at...
So
the classic...
There's still programs, there's still hellhounds, there's still eyes.
Black eyes that will fry your neurons. I mean...
Jack in, jack out.
Exactly.
We can probably do a whole episode on just the changes, the Netrunners and the programs.
Well, I think it's worth actually doing a whole episode of what Netrunners are about, what the web is like, or the net is like now.
And how to kind of clarify.
Yeah, how people deal with the fact that you can't access the net safely without risking a total neural rewrite, or to basically become a vegetable. All the systems in Cyberpunk these days are air-gapped, so they're not connected, so everything's local, which gets back to the data pool stuff we were talking earlier. Okay, so the final section on exploring the roles is looking at the wheelers and dealers. These are the movers and shakers within Night City. So first up we have the fixer, and they kind of fit into the roles of the rogues of Cyberpunk. Well, I see them that way.
When I hear rogue, I hear sneak attack, and fixers do not have sneak attack.
Well, yeah, but fixers get pick lock, pickpocket, forgery. They get the proper thief based skills, not the rogue assassin type, which is really just your solo. No,
fair enough. Okay,
what we're looking at is
I see what you.
This is where I'm coming from anyway. And I get what you mean about rogues in D&D. Perfectly. Valid.
No, that's fine.
But the thing is that things like the lack of a global network, the fact that you've got night markets, really elevate fixers to a more...
All right, night markets.
Prominent role.
What are they? Because we did not have those on 2020, and they show up in Cyberpunk Red.
Yeah, look, there's night markets that run locally about once a month here. And basically, you get a whole bunch of small traders who gather into a single space, be it a mall, like a open air mall, or a back alley street. In Cyberpunk, you could pick anywhere, derelict
or a
building.
secret invitation only basement.
Oh, God, yeah, exactly. Like the speakeasies from the Prohibition era in America. It's all aimed at providing a place where people can come together, trade and exchange goods, services, and knowledge and information, which
is basically the workplace of the fixer.
Look, in terms of what fixers can do, there's so much variation just in that sort of thing. If you look at the Wildside source book, it has like five or six different options from,
like subclasses of fixers, like
versions
black marketer,
exactly.
talent agent. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, and I think those kind of sub roles of fixers really are gonna come up in Red because of how disconnected everything is. So you really need to specialize, and if you are good at getting weapons, then that's it. That's probably your thing. And other person will be like, you know what? I'm a fixer and I specialize in getting food from like organic farms.
Yes.
Or
I know the local places to go to because, that old multi-story car park over there has been reconditioned with dirt all over the ground and turned into a multi-story food growing place or co-op. And I can get stuff there super cheap. If you want to
take this road because you're going to this other city, you better talk with this fixer who's the one that kind of organizes safe passage with whatever nomad gang.
Certainly makes for a lot of options in terms of play.
Yeah.
The next role...
Same thing with...
Yeah?
Sorry,
I was going to go with the... Yeah, next same thing is also with the executives, with a bit of a slight name change.
So there were corporates before on 2020.
Yep. And now they're executives. And this is, I suppose ties in a little bit to the disappearance of the megacorps, or at least their retreat for the moment. But you also see executives in particular roles such as bureaucratic governments and those sorts of things, of people who run bureaucracies and run organisations. The Wolf of Wall Street's a movie that sort of covers on some of that sort of stuff. And
I like that now the executive, or like, again, the corporate guy, it doesn't have to be this big person working for Biochem, but it could be like a local owner who's doing a franchise of, I don't know.
And that leads to far more interesting stories, that you've got
an appliance store.
Yeah. You're running your own little franchise and you've got to deal with the local people and that sort of stuff to make it all happen and work. And so corporates have always been typecast as the bad guy, and it was difficult to break out of that role. But given these changes, it's kind of... The challenge will be trying to find some good roles for the executive, and trying to make a positive change in what they are capable of. So you might have I keep going corporate for some stupid reason. An executive who runs...
Such a good name, the corpus.
Yeah, but you get an executive who runs a NGO, non-government organisation, that's trying to enact a positive change. You get an executive who's trying to run the bureaucracy for the local government to make things happen, to restore law and order or whatever the local community needs. So just by expanding the idea of this role a little bit, you can get some good things going on.
Do you think there's such a thing in Cyberpunk as a balance party?
They've got a section covering the kind of groups that you can form up and that sort of stuff. And it's kind of interesting because first off, you get bands, so a rocker band. And, not every one of the band members has to be a rocker. That's kind of cool. So in terms of an idealized character party, it really comes in, what team are you forming? Just for example, for the mercenaries, as one example, it's common throughout the world, blah, 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 gives you a bit of a rundown. They'll need a fixer to handle contacts. They'll need a net runner to handle cyber security and combat assaults. Cyber assaults. They'll need a techie for the weapons and that sort of stuff. They'll need solos and nomads to basically act as grunt soldiers and weapon and vehicle operations. And that gives you, in a nutshell, what that mercenary group could be. Trauma team, as you mentioned earlier, again, there are roles that fit into that. And the great thing about this is that it gives you a rundown of the team, what it's about, and who should be in it. And that's a good starting point.
Absolutely.
All right, so finally we've
Skills.
It's all about the skill. Now, when your character first starts up, you get, I think, 9 skills automatically at 2. And then you build on your other stuff and that sort of stuff. So the Jump Start Kit does give you a bit of a bunch of generic skills that everybody's likely to have. But
that is a change from 2020 when you just had some points specific to your role and then some points.
Some pickup skills to add to flavour your character. Yeah, look, it's kind of interesting that way. It does give everybody a sort of a same sort of baseline. I know for some of the stuff I've run, in the game, every character has an education of 2. Now, as a starting point for Red, what I'm inclined to do is saying, okay, if I'm going to run something like Mad Max out in the wilds with kids who have grown up without any sort of formal education, then I might force that and drop that back to 1. But I'd then push another point into somewhere else, such as local expert for expert of their area knowledge, or something like a survival skill, so that they know how to do this sort of stuff.
No, this basic skill thing that they introduce when everyone has this, at least at 2, it balances out the game a little bit, especially for new players, I think. Like I remember, it's like, for example, we keep making comparisons with Dungeons and Dragons, but fuck it.
Yeah.
Like when I remember when I start playing 5e and it's like, all right, what am I proficient with? And like pick 2 skills, and there's like this list of skills, and I'm like, fuck, I don't know, nature, survival.
Well, some of it relies on experience. In some games you're played and I've played, right? There are certain skills that are kind of required but never mentioned in the game, as a thing. Like for Streetwise, for trading with other people, building up rapport and getting hold of access to equipment. Things like athletics, to be able to run, jump, dodge in combat and that sort of stuff. And so there's certain skills that all characters should pick up. But, things like a weapon skill, it's not automatically assumed you know how to use any weapon whatsoever, or a martial art or brawling or melee weapons, right? Or a technical skill. There are certain tech skills that are kind of useful depending on what you want your character to be, but that requires a strong character concept, which we've talked about in the roles, and also enough knowledge of the system and what your GM is likely to do so that you can build a character that then meets that. Jumping back a bit.
What skills... I think the biggest change, first of all, was, or at least I see 2 big changes.
Yep.
The first one, I don't know if it's for simplicity, I don't know if that's going to stay on the core rules, but is that all the weapons skills, all the ranged weapon skills are now down to marksmanship. I like that. So all the ranged weapon skills have
been condensed into marksmanship?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So rifles, SMGs, handguns, bows. So that's like 7 skills that are now 1.
Yeah, and it sort of, it'll change the dynamic in things, I suspect. But I also think that when you get to the release of Cyberpunk Red, that skill list will get expanded up again. Because if you look at the Witcher RPG game, inside that there's polearms and swordsmanship, and there's a couple of variations on generic melee weapons, and there's also archery. And so when you look at the same idea converted across to Cyberpunk, so that gives for the Jumpstart Kit, it keeps it nice and simple. But when you translate and move across to Cyberpunk Red, and I don't doubt that they'll put in some sort of translation guide, even if it's just a 1 or 2 page thing to go from the Jumpstart Kit into full development for Red, that covers expanding up marksmanship into that fuller thing. So you mentioned the second one that you thought was a curious thing.
Education. So I don't see any skills like zoology, botany, mathematics,
It's all been
archaeology, all those super specific things that, at least personally, I never put anything on it.
It depends on your character, I suppose. But yeah.
But it went down to education, and then they added, as part of the rules, there is a general knowledge thing that's based on your education skills. So it's basically, if you have enough high enough, there is a chance that you just know how to do things, even if you don't have the skill, just by pure kind of logic or deduction or history, or what they call it, cultural knowledge.
Yep, cultural knowledge.
That was pretty neat.
Look, it's a nice way of going, I don't know anything about this. GM, can you give me a hint? And you make a cultural knowledge roll and you get a little bit of information that will help you along the way. So it kind of gives a good way for players to go, I don't know anything about this, can you help me? But also in Cyberpunk, there's a skill called expert knowledge. So you've got local expert, which is knowledge of an area, but you've also got expert knowledge, and that might be where they drop in things like chemistry, physics, mathematics, anthropology, history, etc.
I like it more as that, as like expert, and then you write down whatever you're expert on, rather than having 7 or 8 things on the character sheet. What do you need in Cyberpunk Red to dodge a bullet?
Well, I think you need reflexes 10. If you happen to have a defender with a reflexes of 9 or greater, I think it is, they can dodge a ranged attack instead of using the range table. So normally what you do is you'd get your reflexes, add your marksmanship, roll versus the difficulty number, which is 10 to 25 or 30 or whatever it is, depending on the range, to see if you hit. However, if the defender happens to have a reflexes of 10 or more, 10 plus, which, it's possible, then you get to roll your dexterity plus your evasion skill to dodge those bullets. And that may actually be a good option in some cases. I mean, at longer ranges, it won't matter. When you get closer in, it may become a viable option if you've got the reflexes and the dexterity to back it up. Now, the reality, of course, is with something like Cyberpunk is that you're going to need snappier reflexes, obviously. But also the fact is that you can read the intent of the person who's doing this sort of stuff. So I can see it as a really cool option to get that slightly more cinematic quality, that cinematic quality for your game.
You know what I didn't put that I loved from 2020? The dramatic death table.
Dramatic deaths.
Yeah, when you roll to see if it screams or if it rolls on the floor before dying.
Yep.
Or things like that.
Oh, look, some of those are absolutely beautiful. And this is why, for one of the reasons why I'm going to keep making use of the 2020 sourcebook. And when I read through Cyberpunk Red and get used to it, I'll see what I want to carry over from 2020 depending on what they've included or haven't.
Yeah, they added the concentration skill, which is, ability to focus. And
it's kind of cool. The other thing that's really nice is you've got bribery, conversation, and persuasion. Now, persuasion's from the old version of Cyberpunk, but bribery and conversation, your ability to read a person and know what to bribe them with is kind of useful. And also with conversation, your ability to pump people for information, which is kind of like the old version of what they call the interview skill.
I like with conversation that if you fail a conversation check, the subject realizes
what you're
that
doing.
You're trying to get information. I thought that's pretty good. Yeah, I think to kind of have a conclusion, with the Cyberpunk the Jump Start Kit, it has what you need to play, but having the 2020 sourcebook with you, I think will give most DMs and players a lot more options. And I don't think, as it is now, that is too hard to convert or to use, because all you have to do is add things onto it, and the rules of how these things work are on 2020. You can just add them onto your game.
For simplicity's sake, you can take the Friday Night Firefight combat rules and drop them straight into Cyberpunk Red. I don't think that requires much in the way of modifications, but I'd give preference to what's in the Jump Start Kit. The net running rules from 2020 I would completely ignore, because what's in the Jump Start Kit is perfectly serviceable. And there's a few other little bits and pieces.
Body locations,
Yeah.
cyber psychosis.
Yes.
What else?
But even the
fumble
details,
tables, the
the
life
gangs,
type, the life path.
the Lifepath stuff's
details.
definitely a plus. But yeah, so I'll be keeping hit locations. I'll be keeping the full skill list from 2020 and a few other little bits and pieces, but I'll be moving to the new stats.
Oh yeah, you've been working on a character sheet from what you call the Proto Red, which is Red and 2020 combination character sheet. You can find the link on how to get it on the description of this episode.
Thank you for listening. If you have any comments, questions, or queries, if there's something you want us to talk about in the podcast, or any interesting stories that you want to share with us, please get in contact with us through our Facebook group, leave a comment on the SoundCloud, Reddit, or any other form of social media.
And as a last word as this streams into the void, stay safe on those streets.